I've been sorting through my various steering links or linkages. I've got a number of them here, and sorting out to get the best one. Some of them are the drag links slightly bent. I've managed to pull out a set that are good. It's this set. The tie rod ends or ball joints, whatever you want to call them, on each end, they're all serviceable, but I've cleaned them up. I've got to put new seals on the top. Not sure whether I'm using rubber or the original leather. These were leather ones on these particular joints, but I'll see if I've got any good rubber ones to go back on. Anyway, that's a decision I've got to make yet. The what do you call this piece? This mounts on the chassis with your drag links on either end of that, and this linkage goes to the steering column. Now I had to replace one of the joints on that. It was actually worn right out, so I've got a box of them there, so managed to get that done. A little bit of rain on the roof today. It's a bit unusual. We've had unusual weather here, from very hot to rain, but we welcome the rain because we're in the middle of a bad drought. So anyway, a little bit of noise on the roof. These have all been cleaned up. They're apart from the castellated nuts, I've just got them in here cleaning them up. Once I've done all of that, I'll run a bit of grease back into the joints, make sure that the grease is flowing out properly. And with the drag links, they've actually got to be of equal length. I can move that. Not only they've got to be of equal length, but also to make the adjustment properly, when I've got them to equal length, I need to have the same thread spacing on each side, that side to this side, so I'll measure that up, so when it comes to making the final adjustment for toe in, you actually turn the shaft, and if you don't have that even, you'll end up screwing it in or out and finding you're almost out of adjustment on one end of the drag link. So I need to even those up. The same principle applies to this. I need to even that up with the thread on either side, so when I turn that and adjust it, I'm not running out of thread. So I've got to do that. Close to putting that back on the car. Now these weren't on the car either. Sorry, this piece was, but nothing else was. So I've got to put that back on. I'm pretty sure I've got that right. It shouldn't take that long to clean up the rest of it. And once I've got these right, then I can start to connect it back up to the steering column. The steering column is in the car, but it's not bolted up properly yet either. It's just sitting in there, so I could put it in position before I drop the motor in. So anyway, that's progressing quite nicely. Been putting the steering components back in, and I haven't actually tightened them up yet, but you can see through there, they go onto that centre pivot point. I've put the left hand thread ones in the middle, and the right hand thread ones are out on the ends on the wheels. So that means that I'm turning the bar, or basically screwing it into the outside to adjust, or screwing it in or screwing it out, depending on which way you've got to adjust the toe in. That's the toe in I've just done. try and get up on my knees. I've clamped a piece of wood to either side, which enables me to measure over there. Enables me to measure between the pieces of wood. I do it close up to the hubs and measure the before and behind the hub to get the correct toe in, which is anyway. I'll put it down. I think it's 3/8, but I'll put a little note in the video as to what that is. So you just screw each of those links, that on that side and that side, screw them equal amounts. You've actually got to get them the same length to start with, so when you're turning it, you're not actually running out of adjustment. So if they're both equal lengths, and I did that to start, and it was actually towing out by an enormous amount, so I actually had to screw them in, as I say, screwing in to the wheel hub side, the way I've got the ball joints on, to get the right toe in. So that's done. The other thing I've done, I put rubber grease caps on those because I had them. Originally they were leather, and on the others I've actually remade the leather cap. So it's quite a thick piece of leather. I got it off my daughter. She had a few scraps. Come over here. A few scraps of leather, so I used that. It's quite thick, easy enough to cut, and I'll put those on as grease retainers. Originally it had steel caps with a spring on it to keep that down over the joints, so they are okay. I'll put those back on. So at this stage, that's the toe end's complete. I'll just lock up the ball joints. I haven't attached the steering column yet. What I've been doing is actually centralising the column, which I've done. I'll cover that. Use the steering wheel, an old steering wheel inside the car, to centralise the column. So what I'll then do is have the wheel straight, put the end of the, I haven't got that on yet. Yes, I have, just sitting there. I'll adjust that to put it in the right position, so when I turn the wheel I've got an equal turn on either side of the steering wheel. So that's not done yet. That's what the linkage is down there. I've yet to put that on, but it's ready to go on next. Anyway, so it's coming up. Let's see the grease retainers on there. It should work. I mean, it's the way they were designed. As you can see, I haven't actually locked up the tie rods yet. I'll do that next. Just recapping on the toe in. The toe in is actually 1/8 to 3/16. So I've set it at an 1/8 at the back end there. The adjustment on the drop arm shaft there, what you have to do is to first of all position the drop arm. It goes in that position in the centre of its travel. Now, turning the steering wheel, it's about 3 turns from one lock to the other, so 1.5 is in the middle. That's where that's set at the moment. That is probably about 30 degrees off the centre line of the shaft, and that's in the straight ahead position. So I've just positioned that. and when it's in that position the wheel should be straight ahead, and to do that you actually adjust this little shaft here, turn it one way or the other to get the wheels to point straight ahead. So I've just done that. I'll now lock up that, and basically the steering is all back together, which is good to see. I haven't actually put the steering column up into position yet, so I'm still working on putting cables through from the dash to the engine bay. Fitting the dashboard is a challenge, couple of respects. One is to actually connect all the wiring, which I've managed to do over a long period of time. I've checked that to make sure it's working, so hopefully when I finally get it in I won't have to pull it back out again. The other hard bit is all the cables. Now there are a lot of cables coming from the dashboard, mixture, throttle, petrol reserve, the heater cables and so on. Challenge there is finding out where they go through the firewall, and I've managed to do that by process of elimination. And then is to be able to get the dash in place with the cables on the dash, because the cables are going to be a lot harder to put in once I get the dash in because of space and so on. So I've put the cables on the dash, I've run them through the firewall. Now I've just started to put it in and found that the routing of the cables was wrong, so one of the heater cables actually has to go over the steering column. I had it under, so and that was stopping it from going in. So hopefully now that's right. The other problem is the vent tubes, is to be able to get those in the right position so they don't foul the dash, particularly on the glove box side, because there's a cutout there on the glove box where this one has to go in. Now I found that I couldn't connect that up and then push it back because the alignment wasn't quite right, so I've disconnected it from the heater, which allows me to move it around a bit to line up with the hole. So first attempt didn't go in because of some of the cables in the wrong position. Now we're going to do it again. I've got a couple of long screwdrivers going through to position onto the bolt holes. You might be able to do it with two people, but I've only got one person here, so I'm positioning that in the centre so I can then slowly push it in place. I haven't bolted up the steering column yet, so I figured that the supports for the steering column are going to get in the way. Hopefully I can get those supports in after I've got the dash in place. So here goes the second attempt. First attempt didn't work. Hopefully this one will. I've finally got the dash in place. It took a little bit of juggling to get the vent pipe on this side in the right position. Now I thought it actually came down behind the glove box and then across, but it actually, to get it in, I actually had to take it down and then slide it over the top. Now the only way to get that to work was to actually not have the other end of the pipe connected to the heater. So I basically attached the top, fitted the dash in, and then connected the heater after that. So that's all done. The wiring is all in behind. I finally put the horn centre in. That's with all the cables going down through the steering column. That was a little bit tight to get in, but it went in okay. I've adjusted that so the indicator switch here cancels out when you turn the wheel. Now the way to centralise that is a little screw in the bottom of the housing that you you tighten up when you've actually got that centralised. So that's okay. Got the quadrant in for the gear change. That's in, but it's not connected to the gearbox yet. All the cables are in, they're running through the firewall. The top cover over the dash, I've screwed that in place. So everything is in position. It's screwed into place. Things I haven't finished yet are the finishing corners. I mean, I've got them, but I haven't positioned them yet. I'll leave that to the trimming stage. And the radio, I've got a radio to go in there. What it'll be is an old fascia, but new internals. So I've got the wiring set up for that. I've just got to position it. So that's not done yet, but that will be done later on. Now I haven't checked the wiring on the horn. I actually haven't connected it to the other end. I'll just get out of the car for a second. Now there's the wiring coming out the end of the steering column. Some of that will come back up this way. Some of it will go into a loom that I've yet to make up to go along here. Now, also all of these connections are part of that. So I've got indicator components and a whole range of other things to connect up. I was going to do that now, but unfortunately I forgot to put the brake line in. It's something I should have done when I actually had the chassis separate. Now I've pulled it out, or sorry, pulled it out of the pile of parts because it wasn't in there. It's in pieces. I'll see if I can find it and I'll show you what's got to happen with that. Now this pipe is one of the ones I've got in the pile of parts. This section here, this went across the front of the car and connects up to a couple of brackets which mount there, I think, and then the brake hoses go to the front hubs. This one's made out of steel. It's broken off, rusted through on that end, so that one's no good. That one doesn't appear to have been off this car. This one does, because of some of the old paint that I found on it. So what this one had was the bit that goes across the front of the car here had been replaced in copper, so that's still okay. But the rest of the pieces are made out of steel. Now I've just undone the unions, but the pipes are rusted, so I've got to replace those. So what I'm going to have to do is I'll make sure these are the right shape. I'm hoping they are, and I'm hoping I can actually fit it with everything in place that I've got, because this, I understand, goes inside part of the chassis down here, so I've got to work out how to fit that. And the only way I will be able to fit it, if at all, is to do it in pieces. So anyway, I've got one good section and two bad sections, so I've got to make up new brake lines. So that'll be the next job. I really need to get that in position before I can start connecting any wiring and obviously checking this wiring down from the horn. Now, I've just been running the old brake line, or one of the old brake lines I've got. This is the one with the copper on this side. So I've managed to rebend that so it fits into the fittings here, and here it goes under the mount and into the junction piece here, the T-piece. So that's now the right shape. I've got that right. This one I had to rebend to get it to fit properly, so it comes up here onto the wheel, goes under the mount and into the T-piece. Now this long section, probably got a bit of it here. Here's an old one. It's a long section that goes past the, put that down, it goes from there under the steering box, along the side, you can just see I've got it there, and then goes into the chassis in that Y junction there. Now I was actually able to get that in. I thought I mightn't have been able to get it with all of the components in place, but I can get it in. So I know that fits, it's the right shape. And what I'll now do, I mean I haven't connected any of that, I'll now make up a new set of pipes. I've got sufficient pipe here to do that, but I wanted to make sure I've got the right shape to start with, so I'll now take those off and use those individual pieces to shape this, and then I'll put new flanges on the end and connect it all up.